In the primordial eras of human civilization, a time when mystics interpreted the whispers of the cosmos for rulers, and shamans acted as the veritable archivists of universal knowledge, the bond between humanity and the botanical world was not merely practical, but profoundly sacred. This was not a fleeting fashion or a form of escapism masquerading as therapy. It was a sophisticated alchemy, a sacred transaction between the body, the spirit, and the living essence of nature. Within this ancestral framework, the plant we now know as cannabis was never just a simple herb. It was a conduit, a gateway. Yet, a gateway does not solely open onto vistas of light. It can, with equal measure, reveal passageways into the most shadowed corridors of the human soul. At the very core of this exploration lies an inquiry that our modern world seldom dares to address with genuine sincerity. What are the deep, spiritual ramifications of engaging with marijuana? We are not here to discuss the proclamations of governments, the findings of official science, or the narratives of popular culture, which often elevates this plant to the status of a rebellious icon. Instead, our quest for understanding will take us deep into the heart of ancient lore, into the subtext of hallowed scriptures, and into the potent words of seers who ventured far beyond the veil of smoke. Prepare yourself for an odyssey that traverses continents and epochs, drawing upon the wisdom of the Atharva Veda from ancient India, delving into Alexandrian Hermeticism, examining the solemn rituals of the Rastafari, and considering the prophetic insights of Ethiopian sages. Our purpose is not to pass judgment, but to unveil. Cannabis, this botanical entity, now so often trivialized, criminalized, and romanticized in equal measure, was, in a multitude of traditions, a consecrated key. And as we all understand, keys are not objects to be venerated in themselves. They are instruments intended to unlock doors. The crucial question, however, remains: which doors? In ancient India, the Atharva Veda designated it as one of the 5 hallowed plants of the earth, portraying it as a divine endowment, a vessel for Amrita, the celestial nectar of immortality. Its profound association with Shiva, the deity of dissolution and regeneration, is no mere accident of mythology. Shiva is the supreme master of the cosmic dance, the force that dismantles illusion. His most devoted followers, the sadhus, would partake of it in earthen chillums during extended periods of meditation. But this was never done casually. It was invariably embedded within a rigorous ritualistic framework of fasting, incantation, and profound solitude. They were not in pursuit of a recreational high. They were striving for the dissolution of the egoic self, the cessation of their identification with the physical form. In this context, cannabis was not a means of escape. It was an instrument of profound confrontation. Further east, the masters of Taoism perceived the plant as a powerful confederate in the pursuit of longevity and heightened spiritual perception. The writings of the renowned alchemist Ge Hong, within the text known as the Bao Puzi, document specific concoctions of cannabis with ginseng and other potent herbs, designed to induce states of lucid dreaming and to expand the horizons of consciousness. In the Taoist worldview, every single substance possesses a unique life force, a vital energy known as qi. When cannabis was used in harmony with a balanced physical and energetic body, it could serve to purify and enhance this vital flow. However, when introduced into a system already rife with imbalance, it would only exacerbate the internal chaos. It functions as an amplifier, and like any amplifier, it becomes perilous if the instrument to which it is connected is not properly tuned. In the medieval Arab-Muslim world, certain esoteric branches of Sufism were also known to have utilized the plant, particularly in the form of hashish, within their devotional practices. For the Sufis, the ultimate spiritual aspiration was fana, the ecstatic annihilation of the personal self in the overwhelming presence of the divine. Numerous historical accounts describe mystical raptures and sublime visions of the beloved, of God. Yet, even amongst the most revered Sufi masters, there was significant debate and controversy. The great poet and mystic Rumi issued a timeless warning. Why do you seek God in a state of inebriation, when he already dances with perfect sobriety within you? The plant was employed with immense moderation and deep reverence. The moment it ceased to function as a bridge to the divine, and instead became a crutch for the ego, it was resolutely abandoned. Within the mystical Jewish traditions of Kabbalah, there is a conspicuous absence of any direct reference to cannabis. This may be attributable to cultural context or perhaps a deliberate act of caution. Nevertheless, a resonant piece of wisdom echoes throughout their teachings. The Zohar, a foundational text of Kabbalistic thought, issues a stern caution that those who attempt to force open the gates of divine light without adequate preparation will find themselves utterly consumed by their own unripened ignorance. In contemporary terms, this means that without sufficient spiritual grounding and preparation, any sacred substance, no matter how potent, invariably becomes a sophisticated trap for the ego. In Gnostic and Essene Christian circles, archaeological findings, such as those conducted by researchers like Raphael Mechoulam and Sula Benet, point toward the probable use of cannabinoid resins and various herbs in the composition of sacred anointing oils and temple incense. Some academics have even posited that the term kane bosm, mentioned within the Old Testament, was, in fact, a reference to cannabis. But once again, the context is paramount. Its use was never recreational. It was liturgical. It was ritualistic. It was a consecrated gateway to achieving prophetic states of consciousness. When used without this element of sacredness, the plant was deemed profane. Across the vast continents of Africa and the Americas, indigenous shamanic traditions, from the Congo Basin to the heart of the Amazon, maintain a profound and unwavering reverence for what are known as power plants. When cannabis is present in these traditions, it is treated with the very same degree of respect afforded to entities like ayahuasca, mapacho tobacco, or peyote. The core belief is that it is not the plant itself that possesses the power to heal. Rather, it is the spirit of the plant, and that spirit will not reveal itself or its wisdom without the prerequisite of deep respect and proper ceremony. In Afro-American syncretic religions such as Candomblé and Umbanda, although cannabis may not be a central component, the underlying concept of Aksay, a vital, impersonal spiritual force, is directly applicable. Every plant possesses its own Aksay, its own unique vibration, its own sacred purpose. To use a plant without understanding its Aksay is akin to playing a sacred drum without knowing which Orisha, or spirit, it is meant to invoke. Even among the Rastafari, for whom cannabis is known as ganja and is revered as the herb of wisdom, its use is deeply enmeshed in liturgy. It is smoked during reasoning sessions, which are gatherings dedicated to spiritual reflection, communal singing, prayer, and deep meditation. The herb is a sacrament, never a mere pastime. In all of these disparate traditions, a single, unifying thread becomes clearly visible. Cannabis represents potential, and potential, by its very nature, is neutral. It can serve as a ladder to the heavens, or a slide into the abyss. It can be a tool for liberation, or a crutch for dependency. It can be a portal to insight or a prison of illusion. What ultimately defines its effect is not the plant itself, it is the user. It is the consciousness, the intention, and the preparation of the individual who engages with it. Because, as the Corpus Hermeticum so eloquently teaches, the spirit does not yield its secrets to those who knock upon its door while intoxicated with their own self-importance. And those who desperately seek truth by taking shortcuts may ultimately discover that the shortcut they chose was in fact a vicious, repeating circle. In the final analysis, the most pertinent question may not be whether cannabis is sacred, but rather, are you sacred enough to engage with it? Every plant that opens a gateway also simultaneously erects a mirror. And mirrors, contrary to what our vanities might lead us to believe, do not always reflect beauty. Sometimes, they reveal to us precisely what we have spent lifetimes trying to avoid seeing. Cannabis, much like a host of other entheogenic substances, possesses the peculiar gift of dissolving our masks. However, not every soul is prepared to witness its own true face, stripped bare of all illusion. And it is precisely at this juncture that the plant's true spiritual effect commences. Not in the fleeting moment of immediate elevation, but in the unavoidable confrontation that follows. Carl Jung, the progenitor of analytical psychology, famously coined the term shadow to describe the sum total of all the repressed aspects of our being. This is not evil in and of itself, but rather, It encompasses everything that our conscious ego refuses to acknowledge: our deepest fears, our unhealed traumas, our forbidden desires, our ancestral pains. In his extensive writings, Jung asserted that the confrontation with one's own shadow is the indispensable first step toward achieving psychological wholeness. And is it not profoundly curious that a great many individuals, upon smoking marijuana, report experiencing intense anxiety, paranoia, or a discomforting sense of internal exposure? The plant does not generate these feelings. It simply peels away the protective varnish of the persona, and what then emerges is that which has been lying dormant all along. For the practitioners of occult traditions, this phenomenon comes as no surprise. In her seminal work, Psychic Self-Defense, Dion Fortune describes in detail how altered states of consciousness, whether triggered by complex rituals, potent drugs, or severe trauma, can effectively weaken the protective etheric field. This, she warns, renders the individual vulnerable to external, often malevolent, forces. She cautioned, when consciousness falters, entities from the lower regions may draw near, feeding off the emotional breaches that have been exposed. This is not mere superstition. It is a description of subtle psychodynamics. When the conscious mind recedes, be it through sleep, deep meditation, or the influence of cannabis, the unconscious mind takes precedence. And if that unconscious is laden with unhealed wounds, those wounds will invariably begin to speak. What we commonly label a bad trip is, more often than not, the psyche's desperate attempt to clean its own house. The tradition of Raja Yoga, particularly as articulated in Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, recognizes this principle with crystal clarity. Patanjali notes that paranormal powers, or siddhis, can indeed arise spontaneously through the use of certain herbs. However, he issues a stark warning that these powers are fundamentally illusory if they are not accompanied by unwavering discernment and a strong ethical foundation. More than that, he states that the siddhis themselves can become formidable obstacles on the path to samadhi, or true enlightenment, because they feed the spiritual ego, a trap that is even more insidious and difficult to detect than the ordinary ego. Osho, in his various discourses on drugs and spirituality, once remarked that substances can force open doors that should, ideally, only be opened by silence and meditation. They are indeed shortcuts, he conceded, but they are profoundly unstable shortcuts. And very often, those who venture through these doorways without a proper map or a reliable guide find themselves returning through the same door, only now they are deeply disoriented, unsure of their place in the spiritual landscape. On an energetic level, cannabis acts directly upon the subtle body. Many experienced practitioners of Reiki, Kundalini Yoga, and ceremonial magic have reported a significantly heightened sensitivity of their auric field following its use. This can be a positive development if the individual is well-grounded and psychically stable. However, when they are not, they become akin to a lighthouse without a captain, emitting a powerful light that attracts not only harmless moths, but also predatory energetic entities. As some Amazonian shamans say, every plant that opens you is a plant that tests you, and the test is not mystical, it is moral. What will you do with what you are shown? Will you run from it? Will you overanalyze it? Or will you act upon it? Many chronic users of the plant report a persistent feeling of stagnation. The body may feel relaxed, but the soul seems to be stalled. Creativity appears to flow more freely, but it seldom materializes into tangible works. Spirituality feels deep and profound, but it fails to produce any real, lasting transformation in their lives. This is what the Kabbalists refer to as klipot shells of energy, layers formed by unintegrated perceptions and poorly digested mystical experiences that accumulate like psychic dust in the spiritual field. They create the pervasive illusion of growth without any actual advancement. And herein lies the greatest danger, mistaking the act of feeling a great deal for the process of evolving. Because not all expansion is elevation. Expansion without a clear direction is merely swelling, and swelling, sooner or later, is destined to burst. At this juncture, cannabis, when used unconsciously or abusively, transforms from a sacred plant into the plant of stagnation. This is not due to its intrinsic nature, but rather due to the disconnected manner of its use. It does not, in itself, generate spiritual passivity. but it can provide the perfect framework for those who already carry that tendency within them. Some may attempt to argue, if I feel a sense of peace, then surely it must be working. But a peace that is generated by an external agent is like the tranquility found within a locked room. It is beautiful, but it is entirely artificial. True peace is born even in the midst of chaos, because it is rooted deeply in the core of one's being. If cannabis grants you a feeling of peace, you must ask yourself, is it teaching you how to generate that peace for yourself, or is it merely renting you a temporary, fleeting illusion? The true encounter with the divine almost always begins with the encounter with one's own shadow, and that meeting is seldom pretty. There are no rainbows, no soft focus filters. There are tears, shame, anger, and profound confusion. But if you can remain in that space, breathing, staying attentive, something remarkable happens. Not a hallucinogenic revelation, but a quiet, steady integration. An acceptance of what is, and from that acceptance, the birth of what can be. In this context, cannabis is like a mirror made of water. It can show you the reflection of the sky, but if you dive into it too hastily, all you will find is mud. The human spirit does not journey alone. The inner voyage, as solitary as it may appear, is always an echo of the collective web to which we all belong. No spiritual practice, no power plant, no enlightenment is a purely individual affair. Everything that touches us reverberates throughout our culture, and everything that our culture accepts or rejects in turn shapes how we touch ourselves. Cannabis is a perfect illustration of this principle. A plant with deep mystical roots has now been transformed into a global commodity, a pop icon, a subject of heated political debate, and a symbolic currency of youthful rebellion. But long before the days of legalization or repression, it was already an integral part of the sacred. And in certain pockets of the world, it still is. In the Rastafarian tradition, for example, ganja is not perceived as an addiction. It is a vow, a sacred pact with the divine. Born in the 1932nd in Jamaica, the Rastafari movement emerged not only as a form of resistance against colonialism and oppression, but also as a spiritual renaissance, deeply rooted in African traditions, the Bible, and a unique worldview. For the Rastas, the herb is the healing of the nations, as prophesied in the Book of Revelation. Smoking it is a sacrament, a means of drawing closer to Jah, their name for the living and ever-present God. There is no banality in the act, there is only reverence. The reasoning sessions, where the herb is smoked collectively, while engaging in deep philosophical reflection, are liturgical practices. Silence, listening, words, and smoke move together in harmony. In that space, the collective becomes the cathedral, and the plant serves as the incense of the spirit. But it is not just the Rastas. On the African continent, particularly within certain Bantu traditions, there are historical records of the ritualistic use of cannabis in celebrations, funerals, and rites of passage. It was not used to forget pain, but to pass through it. It was an instrument of presence, not of escape. It was an invocation of the ancestors, not a tool for alienation. In pre-Columbian America, although cannabis itself was not native, the use of psychoactive plants in collective rituals was widespread. The underlying concept remains identical. Substances that open portals are to be used, yes, but only when supported by a robust framework of cosmology, myths, rituals, and priests, by a symbolic, collective structure. Outside of that structure, the plant is desacralized. It becomes mere chemical stimulation. And that is precisely what modernity has done. It has violently yanked the plant out of the temple and tossed it onto the shelves of our cultural supermarkets. It has turned it into a meme, a product, an aesthetic. What was once a sacrament has become a marketing campaign. What was once a vehicle for transcendence has become a brand. The psychedelic culture of the 1962nd did attempt to reclaim that ritualistic value, but it did so without roots, without a lineage, without proper initiation. People listened to the words of Alan Watts and Timothy Leary while mixing cannabis with acid and political fervor. It was, without a doubt, a genuine search for transcendence, but it was a fragmented one. Aldous Huxley had already warned in The Doors of Perception that the visionary experience may reveal, but it does not teach. It shows, but it does not structure. And the danger always lies in mistaking a fleeting glimpse for permanent residence. Western culture, in its broad discrediting of tradition, has created a perilous void, the void of spirituality without ritual, of experience without ethics, of ecstasy without integration, of insight without action. Cannabis, in this modern context, became a symbol of counterculture, of rebellion, of freedom, but almost never of spiritual responsibility. This is why, in the traditions where it remains sacred, its use is always collective. The group functions as a container, as a compass, as a witness. In many Afro-Amerindian rituals, for example, no one ever uses the plant alone. There are chants, there are instruments, there are cycles of use and cleansing. There is a limit. The collective sustains the sacred. The individual dissolves in order to be reborn. And here we return to the very heart of the matter. Cannabis possesses a cultural soul. It carries within it all the narratives in which it has been wrapped. When used within the temple, it acts as a sacrament. When smoked alone in the dark room of anxious solitude, it tends to amplify disconnection. It is as malleable as water, but it always takes the shape of the vessel into which it is poured. And the vessel of modern culture is often shallow, rushed, and cynical. The herb that once invoked gods is now the subject of Netflix series. The hemp of knowledge has been reduced to a marketing pamphlet, a stand-up comedy joke, a designer rebellion. But there is resistance. It exists in indigenous communities that refuse the spiritual extractivism of Western culture. It exists in young seekers who are reclaiming the practices of ritual, fasting, and song. It exists in silent masters who, even amidst the cacophony of urban noise, teach how to smoke in a state of prayer. The plant remains the same. What changes is the context. What changes is the intention. What changes is the symbolic field that sustains the experience. And perhaps, deep down, that is its greatest lesson. Spirituality is not an individual sensation, but a collective frequency. It is not what you feel, but what you generate. It is not what you see under the plant's influence, but what you become after its effects have faded. As an old African proverb says, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together in a circle. Bring the drum, bring the fire, bring the plant. True spirituality is not measured by the altered states you experience, but by the elevated states you are able to sustain. The path is not revealed by the lights you see, but by what you do with the shadow that those lights inevitably cast. Between the light and the fog, there exists a very thin line, and its name is discernment. Cannabis, like all power plants, carries with it no promises. It carries only possibilities, possibilities that can illuminate or confuse, inspire or numb. And it is here that the spiritual seeker arrives at a critical crossroads. Are they seeking to expand their consciousness, or are they seeking to escape from it? Osho, so often misunderstood as a simple hedonist, said something profoundly subtle. Anything can become a meditation if you are present, and anything can become a drug if you are absent. The issue is not the plant, it is the quality of awareness that accompanies it. And when presence is absent, the path transforms into a dizzying carousel. This is precisely why the ancients always accompanied the use of sacred plants with meticulous rituals, fasting, chanting, silence, preparation, and guidance. This was not born of superstition, but of a deep understanding of energetic hygiene. They knew what we have so conveniently forgotten. A portal is not a place for sightseeing. It is a place of passage, and not every soul is ready for what lies on the other side. Discernment, known as crisis in Greek philosophy and viveka in Vedanta, is the invisible blade that separates what is real from what is merely sensation. It is the eye of the middle path, the third eye not as a psychic power, but as an inner compass. And in the spiritual use of cannabis, without that compass, what feels like enlightenment might just be a state of hypersensitivity. What feels like a profound vision might be nothing more than a mental echo. What feels like deep intuition might be a cleverly disguised desire. There is a particular kind of intoxication that feels deceptively like clarity. It often comes with brilliant insights, synesthesia, and a cascade of synchronicities. But if these insights do not fundamentally change your relationship with others, with the world, and with your own shadow, then they are little more than spiritual fireworks, beautiful to behold, but ultimately aimless. The true path is far more arid. It demands consistency, It demands presence without spectacle. It demands silence without inner noise. And that is why cannabis, when used outside of a structured, disciplined path, can create an addiction far more subtle than a chemical one. The addiction to the feeling of spirituality, without the actual practice of spirituality. It is easy to appear profound under the plant's influence. It is far harder to be profound while stuck in traffic, while waiting in a bank line, or while in the midst of a conflict with someone who has hurt you. Enlightenment is not measured by what you see with your eyes closed. It is measured by what you do with your eyes open, with your feet soiled by the earth. And when there is no discernment, what cannabis often does is create a fogged mirror, where the ego gazes upon itself and sees an awakened being, when in fact, it has merely taken a long nap in the lap of pleasant sensations. It is a kind of vegetative peace that paralyzes more than it pacifies. In traditional occultism, there is a principle known as the false light of Hod. This refers to a sensation of mental clarity that is, in reality, just the mind intoxicated with a flood of unintegrated images, a surface brilliance with no roots. Cannabis, when used without wisdom, can feed this very illusion, the illusion of progress, while one is actually just walking in increasingly colorful circles. That is why the plant should only be used, spiritually speaking, when the inner soil has been tilled and cleansed, when there is a crystal clear intention, when there is real silence before the first inhalation, and an even deeper silence afterward, when there is guidance, tradition, method, and humility. And above all, when one is truly prepared to receive the answer it will give. Because as the Sufi master Hafiz once wrote, God is like a mirror that does not laugh at your grimaces. It simply shows them to you, clearly. Is cannabis a plant with profound spiritual potential? Absolutely. But all potential demands context, discipline, intention, and understanding. When it is stripped of its ritualistic function and transformed into a cultural product, it runs the grave risk of becoming just another form of distraction. True spiritual seeking is a subtle art. It is not about escape. It is about staying. It is not about seeing lights. It is about becoming light. So, what are you truly seeking when you light that joint? Is it peace? Is it space? Is it silence? If you cannot find those things within your own being, then perhaps the plant is merely lending you a mirror, and mirrors, in the end, can only show you the reflection. If this exploration has stirred something within you, consider sharing it with someone else who is also seeking more than just smoke, someone who is seeking clarity, truth, and genuine depth. Thank you for watching.